Meow.
What the heck, guys? How you guys doing? Thank you for the resub. I appreciate it. I messed around a little bit with my mic settings. I hope I got it correct though. I was messing around a little bit with mic settings right before the stream, so hopefully I didn't fuck up everything. We'll see. I might have to mess around with it a little bit more. Just you know, adjusting a bit of the noise gate or something, because I feel like it's picking up a bit more. I have a little like gain knob I can turn on the mic itself, so I don't have a gain filter on it, but I messed around with some of my filters that I have on the mic for the streams and some of the values on it. So we'll see. Maybe this is better. Okay. Well, it seems like it's fine, right? Okay. We got this. We got this. This is all good. That's nice. I think, yeah, I increased the noise gate a little bit more. So it shouldn't pick up too much. What I also just recently learned is like the order for your filters, like the in which order they are listed, also matters. It's not just applying the filters; it also matters what order they're in, apparently. And I think my order was also completely wrong. Because I think I had the compressor first, then noise suppression, and then noise gate. But now I have noise suppression first, then noise gate, and then compressor. And it seems to be better. How are you guys doing? I hope you're having a nice Sunday. I just got my drink here as well. What you drinking? So picky about some for my. I'm drinking this one right here, a cherry flavor. My parents got me this little box that comes with 3 of them. You can buy, like, apparently you can buy these now just in grocery stores. So my parents picked me that one up because that's the only flavor they have in the grocery stores that I haven't tried yet. The other ones are all of the ones from the sample packs that I've had. It's okay. Not as an intensive cherry flavor as I would have hoped. I think so far my top 3 are still strawberry, raspberry, and Watermelon. Mm, 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 mm. Uh, yeah, the watermelon one is really good. It might be the nostalgia factor kicking in as well, that it just fucking tastes like the watermelon bubble gums that I used to have as a kid. Who knows? Mm, 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 mm. Just looking at some things right now with I know we're getting a lot of shit soon in Honkai. As a used like a lollipop watermelon flavor. I'd get at Toys R Us. That thing was so good. Best 99 cents. Man, I miss when candy was that cheap. You know, that was always fun. I miss being able to like go to a corner store over here and just, I don't know, buy like a Twix bar for like 70 cents or something. Nowadays it's like almost €2 or something. Very unfortunate. Mm. $3.29. I can buy a whole thing of peanuts for $2. That's insane. The prices are so bad. Can we just go back? Can we just go back, please? Man. All right, so I have to actually. So I've been trying to tinker around a little bit with Emote Labs right now, and I need to download something, or like, actually, I don't need to download it. God, I can just grab it from my mom's PC, but I have to do it later. Because I need to edit a few things, but yeah, we're probably gonna be getting some new emotes soon, at least like temporarily made with Emote Labs, until I can like commission an artist to get properly made ones in the style that I want. Oh, Lily, I don't think I've shown you what I've made so far, like what it looks like. Have you? Have I? I don't think I have. Let me show you real quick. I'm gonna send it to you on Discord. There you go. I just need to add like the faded red hair tips on it, and I think it's almost done. It's very cute so far. I agree. But yeah, I have to edit the textures to add like the little red faded tips, because you can only you can only edit the full color of the hair otherwise. I already noted down in which of the files I have to go into. I just need a better like editing software for it. I can definitely tell my mic is a bit more sensitive now. Like it. Oh. I just have to get used to it now. Like I have to either be a bit closer to the mic. Like it doesn't pick up when I'm too quiet, which I do kind of like. But it's also better that it doesn't like pick up any of the background noises, I feel like. Let's see. Then again, I should be closer to the mic most of the time. All right. Yeah, I'm curious how this book is going to continue though, because we ended off last week on them about to head out to, you know, get the ingredients or something for that antidote spell or something. So this is like, I think now where the main adventure would start, I would assume. That's gonna be nice. And as always, we're probably going to be reading 3 to 4 chapters, depending on how long they are. I'm a bit tired today, so we might not do as long in the book as usual. Because we're probably also gonna have to do a lot of reading in Genshin. Because we're gonna continue with the world quest and exploration in the Temple of Space. So there's a lot of things we gotta do in there. There's a lot of reading there for the story. Lily, what the hell? Thank you for the 6-7 bits. Oops. Bathing. You guys are insane. What the heck? That as well. I could add like a little animation to that one instead of just having my static emote like that. We can do a lot of different things. Sound got excited. Yeah, it's if I don't have Streamlabs in the foreground, it kind of messes with the sounds like that. Because I have the sounds coming directly through Streamlabs. So I have, I can like split the audio a bit better. So it messes up if I don't have Streamlabs in the foreground. Like usually during the reading streams, I have Streamlabs on one monitor to like check on the streams and everything. And I have the chat on the other monitor. And if I play a game, I have the game on one and then Streamlabs and chat together on the other one. Maybe I should get a third monitor, huh? Get like a third, just place it like vertically just for chat. Might as well. We'll see. I'm happy with my new second monitor already, so okay, let's see how long the chapters are. Let's see how far we can go today. Chapter 11 is about 13 pages. Okay. Chapter 12 goes from 138 to 146, so that's about 8 pages. Chapter 13 goes to like 160, and then 14. Okay, 14 goes to 172. So we're either gonna go until like 14 or like either 13 will be the final one or 14 will be the final one, depending on how I feel once we're finishing 13. No, we're about to have an ad in 3 minutes, so we're gonna be starting after the ad, so we're just gonna let this all play out. But yeah, we're probably gonna be doing Genshin afterwards because I gotta finish that, and then I said already that I'm gonna be doing more streams throughout the week last week, but I didn't really do many. Apart from the Genshin update release stream that I did, so we might start with it more this week. Because I gotta finish the Resident Evil stuff. I still want to go through all the games. Gonna start with Ori, all that stuff. I'm not sure how I'm gonna be doing RE6, but I definitely know what's gonna happen for RE5. Considering 5 and 6 are the only co-op ones. I'm also going to keep an eye out on that Dead as Disco game to see when that will have a price. And well, the release is already May 5th, so that's in like less than a month, which I'm super excited about. That game is super fun. Ah, yes. at the bottom of the store page. More games like this. Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, Devil May Cry 4, Devil May Cry 5, DMC, Devil May Cry, Hi-Fi Rush. Then again, I really want to play Hi-Fi Rush as well. Hi-Fi Rush seems so up my alley. And my PC should be able to handle it, I hope. Well, looking at the recommended settings, the recommended parts, Ryzen 5 1500X. Well, I have a Ryzen 7 2700X, so that's slightly above that. Then in graphics, an RX 6600. I think I have an RX 7600. So I should be okay for Hi-Fi Rush to run fine. Ah, man. I just cannot afford it right now, but I really want to play it at some point. It's another just like really fun rhythm beat 'em up style game. Sadly though, I think that developer studio got shut down, because weren't they like bought off by Microsoft and then closed down later down the line or something? I forgot. I could be wrong. It's Krafton Publishing, but it was Tango Gameworks as the studio. And I think Tango Gameworks has been shut down. Yeah. Tango's parent company ZeniMax Media was acquired by Microsoft in 2021, making Tango the first Japanese studio in Microsoft Gaming's development portfolio. Microsoft closed the studio in June 2024. Man. We love to see that. Oh, never mind. Never fucking mind. Actually, good news, Lily. So in May 2024, Microsoft abruptly shut down Tango Gameworks, the studio behind Hi-Fi Rush, Ghostwire Tokyo, and the Evil Within series. However, its demise was short-lived, as publisher Krafton acquired the studio and the rights to the Hi-Fi Rush IP a few months later in August. Let's fucking go. Hell yeah. But yeah, I really want to play Hi-Fi Rush. You know me. You know me when it comes to rhythm games and stuff like that. And I gotta say, I did like playing Devil May Cry as well, like the kind of like beat 'em up style. I also like the older style God of War games that are more beat 'em up hack and slash. So a combination of that, like Deadest Disco and Hi-Fi Rush, just seems so right up my alley. It could be so fun to play on stream. I mean, you guys have already seen how excited I was just playing Deadest Disco, like the little demo. So just imagine the full game and Hi-Fi Rush. If I would play those. Hell fucking yeah. I need to check something else real quick before we start with the book. I want to see who is like voicing in there. Oh my, okay, all right. Robbie Damon is the main character. Erica Lindbergh is in there. Roger Craig Smith. Todd Haberkorn. Okay. Let's fucking go. Oh, Todd Haberkorn is voicing a lot of different characters in there, huh? Nah, that's great. Fuck yeah. Oh, Lily, I just saw Robbie Damon, the voice of the main character in Hi-Fi Rush. He also voices the main character in Rooster Fighter. He voices Keisuke. He is the Rooster. Oh, he's also in Date Everything. Of course he is. Who isn't in Date Everything? He's in Sound Euphonium. Lily, we still gotta watch that. He's the teacher. He's the teacher in Sound Euphonium. Let's go. I actually never watched the English dub of Sound Euphonium. Oh, he's Megumi in Jujutsu Kaisen. Oh, he's Goro Akechi in Persona? In Persona 5? Damn. Fuck yeah. Akechi, yeah, he's Akechi in P5. What's wrong with Akechi, huh? Bathing, what's wrong? I gotta say, the arc they gave him in P5 Royal was so nice, and I feel like it was very much necessary after whatever they did in base P5 with him. Oh, he's P33 in Near Replicant. What? No, that's sad. I mean, like that. He was a, I would say he was a pretty good character. That's for sure. And I still remember, like, I've watched that scene in both Japanese and English. The scene in Shido's palace when he goes psychotic and like starts attacking you. The voice acting in that, like the crazy voice and the laugh, was so fucking good. In both the Japanese and the English dub, they were so good. I loved it. All right. Shall we start with the book for today? Man, actually, when I'm getting close like this, I can feel the better settings that I have now. Oh. I can tell the better settings. Oh, that means you guys are in for a treat with this now, huh? All right. We shall begin then with chapter 11. There was a sweet, peppery smell on the breeze that Aloysia knew came from the mosses and liverworts all over the stretch of hearth. She'd noticed one of her favorites, starwort for its shape, springing in dewy, lime green tufts from between the rocks and grasses, and she was quietly taking pains not to step on any as they yomped along the watery autumn sun. She was no expert, but ever since they'd made their way out of Tangaroot Town and into the wilder fringes of the valley, it seemed to her that they were making good progress. At least the mountain seemed to be getting bigger instead of smaller. She only wished she didn't have to keep reminding herself not to use her wand, a point she was by now fervently wishing she'd considered before packing her bag, since it meant that instead of bobbing along beside her, it was bumping against her back. "I've got to ask," said Hollis, who was cheerful for some reason Aloysia hadn't yet put her finger on, but of which she was already suspicious. "Why the teapot?" This was in reference to the engraved silver pot, complete with tea cozy, that Aloysia had lashed to the outside of her pack along with a length of twine, owing to there being no room left on the inside. "In case of fire," she said dryly. "The pillow?" This she'd half stuffed into the front pocket, so it flopped over behind her, flapping gently as she went. "It matches my eyes." "And I assume the crochet hooks are deadly weapons?" "No," she said, hopping blithely from one rock to another. "They're for crochet." He gave her a smile of grudging respect, his eyes bright. She didn't trust it. They walked on together, Crow flying low just ahead, keeping a weather eye out for worms and beetles to snack on, while her cat dragon gamboled along after some kind of butterfly. Aloysia faintly recognized it from one of her books on pollinators. She let the back of her mind work to place it while the rest of her marched on. Is it weird? She asked Hollis for something to say. Being out here without the Guardian? He studied her, as if trying to see the motive for her sudden interest. If I'm honest, it's still a bit odd talking to somebody who answers me back, he said. Oh, you'd better get used to it, said Crow from a little way off. She's got an opinion on everything. No, I haven't, said Aloysia, betrayed. What happened to there are actual worms who are better company? Exhibit A, may it please the court, said Crow, with a what did I tell you widening of his beady eyes. Hollis looked from one to the other and said, There's an argument that was a statement of fact. Yes, said Aloysia with a smug look at Crow. Thank you. Oh, don't you start. Crow rolled his eyes, twirling higher as if to get away from them both. I was sticking my neck out trying to warn you, he said grumpily to Hollis. And what do? Snap it. You two deserve each other. Aloysia glanced at Hollis, who had glanced at her. All right, I'm sorry, Crow, Hollis said, looking up at him with contrition. I consider myself warned. And don't you forget it, said Crow with a huff. Oh, no. Aloysia cried suddenly as she remembered where she'd seen the butterfly before. She began to pick her way hastily towards her cat dragon. What happened? Hollis called after her. I've just remembered what it is, she said, glancing over her shoulder from a fair distance away already. It's a Benefly. Hollis looked questioningly at Crow. Aloysia could see that both of them were none the wiser. From Benedicat Tibi, she called, becoming breathless and hating herself for it. Which means she'd almost reached her cat dragon when he swung a paw up to bat at the Benefly. In her peripheral vision, she saw Hollis and Crow look at each other again and heard Crow intone, She does this. She lurched to grab her cat dragon before he made contact with the Benefly, but she overreached and stumbled. While she was finding her footing again, he leapt, flapped his wings madly, and swiped. As he finally batted the Benefly, it sprinkled him with a layer of gray wing dust, and he was sneezing before he hit the ground. Bless you, called Hollis reflexively. Yes, Aloysia said weakly as her cat dragon sneezed again. A magical sneeze that lifted him off the ground and knocked him bodily into her chest. She landed with a thump and checked underneath her for starwort. That's right. Their ring dust is the active ingredient in most sneezing spells. Aloysia was clinging to her cat dragon and being launched a foot in the air with each of his sneezes, which also came with a puff of white smoke. The Benefly shook itself, darted threateningly at the cat dragon. That's what you get. And then fluttered off across the heath. Hollis and Crow reached them just as the sneezing stopped. A long string of glistening goo dangled from the cat dragon's nose as he rolled in her arms to look up at her with bewildered, glassy eyes. What was that? Aloysia's heart surged with pity and affection for him. Aw, life's full of hard lessons, huh? She said, fumbling in her pocket for her ivy monogrammed handkerchief. But by the time she'd retrieved it, she found she needed it for herself, catching a succession of her own sneezes just in time. She opened her eyes to see Hollis holding her cat dragon and wiping his snout with his own handkerchief. The little fluffball gazed up at him with the fascination of a baby looking into its parent's face. Something about the scene flooded Aloysia with the sensation that Hollis had walked in on her naked. Suppressing the feeling, she clumped over to them and muttered, "Thank you," and retrieved her cat dragon. She was pointedly quiet for the next several minutes. Hollis seemed determined to remain chipper. "What do you need a sneezing spell for anyway?" he said. Hands in pockets when they were back underway, Crow gliding lazily ahead again, and her cat dragon twining underfoot, glaring anxiously at the sky. Hollis was striding along perfectly merrily, which rankled with her. Isn't that kind of mean? Actually, a good sneeze can protect the body by expelling all kinds of pollen and other irritants, she said, more haughtily than she'd meant to. She didn't say, including certain other spells that can really get in there. He gave her a knowing look, and she expected him to say it for her, but he didn't. So, definitely not for kids to buy from joke shops, he said instead. Well, sometimes, she admitted quickly, but you know, it's not only witches and wizards who run joke shops, and besides the things non-magical kids do with dandelions. She trailed off as her eyes settled on the horizon. The mountains seemed to have shifted around to where she'd been thinking of as the west of them, but only really because it was to their left. Hollis had the compass. "Are we lost?" she said, turning on the spot and realizing she couldn't even see the town anymore. There was nothing but heathland and hill rocks and distant copses in all directions, save straight ahead, where behind a steep rise she could see the point of the same gleaming tower she'd watched the birds fly over on her way down to Tangleroot. "No," said Hollis. "I just need to pick something up before we get to Castercombe." Before she could ask all the questions that had jostled into her head, what, where from, how long would that take? You couldn't have asked me first. He was already darting off towards the tower. "Don't worry," he said, throwing a smile over his shoulder. "I'll catch you up. Just head that way," he said, gesturing with a firm, cutting motion. By the time Aloysia had followed his gesture and turned back to explain that she didn't think it was sensible for them to split up, he had disappeared over the rise. She thought about going after him, but as soon as he was out of sight, the sheer stubborn pride that had been powering her onwards with her clanking, weighty pack and crumpled boots went out of her. There was a thunk as she dumped her pack on the ground and went through the main compartment. There was a sudden smell of fish as she opened a lidded tin. She flumped onto a patch of grass, pulled her hat from her gently steaming head, and watched Crow and her cat dragon come running at the scent of lunch. She had time to take a swig of tea from her flask, eat one ham and tomato sandwich, and apply a pre-made poultice for blisters before the baying sound pierced the peace. Her cat dragon shrank back at once, his fur standing on end, while Crow took off in the direction of the noise, the direction of the tower, until he was high enough to see what was happening. Aloysia's mind and body had come to a complete halt, as if the terror was weighting her down to the ground. She gaped at her familiar, listening for Hollis. For Crow, willed her thoughts to become linguistic again. "How much do we like this guy?" Crow shouted down. His eyes were fixed on something in the distance. "We're still deciding," called Aloysia with surprising presence of mind. "And what's our position on wolves with plants for fur?" She felt herself jump up. "We are not in favor." She scrabbled in the dirt at her feet for a few things from her pack and stuffed them into the pocket of her apron, imagining him tearing away in fear and being lost forever. She also scooped up her cat dragon. Then she whipped her wand out of her pocket and ran. Should I go for help? Crow cried as he hurtled in the direction of the tower. No time, Aloysia panted. If this was what she thought it was, they'd be dead before he disappeared over the horizon. As she crested the rise, Aloysia saw it, and it took the breath from her lungs. Standing between Hollis's waist and chest in height, its brown breath coming in damp, white puffs, was a thing like a wolf with a coat of virid tufts of the kind of odd branching greenery that grew on the sparse trees here. Every offshoot ended in a prong that seemed to writhe of its own accord, like so many thousand reaching fingers. Aloysia knew why Crow, flapping now at her shoulder, had thought that creature was part plant, but she recognized it immediately. And with a paralyzing jolt of horror, as exactly what she'd feared. A lycanthrope. They were poison. Not only were they broader, taller, and more powerful than any non-magical wolf, they were also toxic. The lichen of their coats secreted a limpid protective wax, as well as injecting a poison through their spines into the skin of their victims, knocking them out without killing them. It was said because the lycanthropes preferred their meals warm. It had Hollis backed against the tower. He was maintaining steady eye contact with the creature, leaning forward with arms bent at his side, a stance that told her he was preparing to take hold of it by the scruff of the neck and fight it barehanded if he had to. His knuckles were white. Pressed against her body with one hand, Aloysia's shivering cat dragon was already wriggling and kicking to get away. She felt his paws pounding against her stomach and knew that if he extended his claws, her travel cloak and dress would be shredded. Inside, every fiber of her body was twanging with the same instinct to be as far from this place as possible, as fast as she could run. She clutched him tighter, closed her eyes, and put her forehead to his. I won't let anything happen to you, she murmured. And in that moment, she realized how true that was. If the lycanthrope came for her, she knew in her bones that she would put herself between it and her cat dragon. And if he didn't even have a name, Little Wick, she whispered, feeling a pang of resignation, but it was never up to her. His tiny heart against hers stopped thrumming like a bird's and slowed to a drumbeat. The world around her seemed to do the same. It was oddly calming. Crow, she said mistily, can I interest you in creating a diversion? Moments later, as Crow gave a shriek that echoed off the walls to the tower and the nearby rock faces, Aloysia stumbled and skidded down the other side of the rise, as discreetly as she could manage with her wand in one hand and Little Wick supported by the other. The lycanthrope jerked its head to look up at Crow and away from Hollis and Aloysia, but it wasn't distracted for long. No sooner had it glanced up than it lost interest and turned back to its prey. Hollis had barely made it 2 steps. Crow continued to shriek, but the lycanthrope simply flicked an ear and ignored him. Crow wasn't done. Before she'd scrambled down the rise, Aloysia had given him what she'd grabbed before she left the picnic site. The tomatoes from her sandwiches. She didn't know whether the wolf peaches would work as well against the lycanthropes as they did against werewolves. And they were only thin slices, not the full pulpy fruit. But it was worth a try. They rained down around Hollis in a half circle. 1 or 2 slapped the beast between the eyes, where the lichen hissed and steamed. The tiny fronds snatched to dislodge the fruit, but retracted at the touch as if burnt. The lycanthrope had squeezed its eyes shut, barking and tossing its head, but the pain seemed to abate almost as soon as Each small red circle was thrown clear. Still, it was enough to make the beast hesitate. What am I doing? There we go. It was pacing the edge of the half circle, whining and looking from the tomato slices to Hollis and back again. Aloysia's heart squeezed at the question of how long it would be before it realized it could step over them without coming to harm. She had been hoping to avoid hurting it, but already the lycanthrope was testing the barrier with a wary paw. It took a step forward, folding back its lips to its livid pink gums, and yellow fangs were bared in Hollis's direction. A rumbling reverberated in its throat. Aloysia's gaze swept to the top of the tower. She'd been hoping for a loose panel, but the golden cone that formed the roof seemed to be made of a single piece of metal. The vine that was wrapped around the tower she could think of a few uses for. The telltale broad, nine-pointed leaves of the Enia creeper made excellent teas, and were a vital ingredient in several cold remedies. But none of that would help them now. There, a patch of decay a short way from the roof. 7 or 8 of the gray stones that made up the walls of the tower had been loosened, and each looked to be about the size and weight of the average brick. She took aim with her wand and, with a complicated movement, whipped the patch of stones right out of the wall with a crunch, before a flick of the wrist sent all 8 cascading down onto the lycanthrope's head, where they broke into two with a clunk. The lycanthrope swayed gently, its eyelids drooping and lifting as if in a daze, and then it turned its head lazily to look at her, and as its gaze found her, it shook itself and its eyes widened. How did it survive that? Aloysia thought in a panic. The tiny part of her that was relieved not to have killed another living thing was drowned out by the much larger part screaming about her own survival. She thrust her wand into her pocket, wrapped both arms around Littlewick, turned on the spot, and ran. She could hear the lycanthrope's paws thudding into the ground before her, the grass tearing with every step, its breath coming in quick, sharp pants as it gained on her. Littlewick was frantic. He tossed and kicked and scrambled in her grasp, his claws finally unsheathed and scratching at her forearms. But she kept going, so fast she couldn't tell what her feet were doing. Her lungs and her throat were burning, and her heels on her toes and her knees all seemed to be trying to get away independently. Her legs, moving faster than her mind could manage, stumbled over themselves, and she fell. Her hands flew out to catch herself, and all at once she felt the warm, silky body of Littlewick slink up to her torso and over her shoulder before bounding off her shoulder blade and away. Her knees were skinned, her palms studded with grit. She shoved herself up, spun on the spot, and ran back the way she'd come. Her eyes scanning the landscape for her cat dragon, but finding only the lycanthrope advancing, eyes flashing, tongue lolling, verdant coat grasping. Then she saw him. Between Aloysia and the lycanthrope, darting helter-skelter across the heath, the tiny form of Littlewick wreathed in white smoke. The lycanthrope kept coming. Littlewick kept going. Aloysia was never going to get him in time. Mid-leap, Littlewick shot a ball of rosy flame from his throat at their attacker, and it hit the lycanthrope full in the chest. Aloysia shrieked, but the flame stuck the lycan's waxy coating and was extinguished, going out in a burst of steam. The lycanthrope shook itself and didn't miss a step. Littlewick mewed in surprise and skidded to a stop, his tiny head upturned to stare at the beast bearing down on him. The white smoke streaming from the cat dragon's nostrils now almost obscured him. Come back! Aloysia cried, but her voice caught in her throat. Come back! She put on a burst of speed that she didn't know she had and wailed his name. When she was within grasping distance, she flung out a hand to grab whatever part of him she could reach and pull him back. As her hand wrenched his tail, Littlewig yowled and surged forward, and the white smoke streaming backwards over his shoulders shot out in front instead, like an overclocked bee smoker. It was the lycanthrope's turn to skid in its tracks where the smoke shrouded the lichen. It spasmed and shrank and turned white. Littlewig threw Aloysia a look over his shoulder, eyes wide in the light. Again. She wanted to protest, but she knew there wasn't time. Wincing, she gave his tail a second yank and again he lurched forward. Again, more smoke than it should have been possible to contain in that tiny body spewed at the lycanthrope. Again, the lichen whitened. The lycanthrope dropped to its haunches and tried to push itself back with just its forepaws. It was just two patches now. One of the beast's belly, one on its chest. But it was already whining and lifting a front paw to droop over its eyes. Aloysia knew it was defeated. And then something sharp and metallic described an arc through the sunlight, with a white-faced Hollis on the end of it. And before she knew what she was doing, Aloysia had thrown herself between the shepherd and the lycanthrope and was crouched on the ground trying to catch her breath at the point of a sword. "What are you doing?" Hollis wheezed. "It tried to kill us. It'll do it again." "I second this sword-wielding motion," cried Crow, appearing above them, the retrieved tomato slices dangling absurdly from his talons. "Only if we invade its territory again," Aloysia panted. "Lycanthropes aggressively defend their cubs." She threw a look in the direction of the nearby woodland. "And their homes." Here, she paused to draw in a deep breath, quiet the pounding in her ears. "But they're actually a really important part of them." She drooped, flinched, looked over her shoulder. Littlewig was dancing around the lycanthrope, which stared at him, grumpy and bothersome, but didn't react beyond that. In its diminished state, it put Aloysia in mind of an overlarge dog. Beside her, Hollis dropped to the ground, the terror visibly flooding out of him. Aloysia noticed he kept his sword pointed in the direction of the creature. "Explain," was all that he could manage. "They keep Barghest numbers down. They don't like to go up against lycanthropes for territory," she managed, breathless. "And believe it or not, actually let mistfoals graze on their lichen in the spring." "Mistfoals?" said Hollis. "The little pony guys?" Aloysia nodded, sucking in air through her mouth, her chest straining. Hollis cast the lycanthrope one last warning look. "I like the little pony guys," he said, nodding, and dropped his sword flat into the grass. They both watched the lycanthrope a moment, resting its chin miserably on its front paws as Crow tempted Littlewig away with a length of Aloysia's crochet wool. Beside her, Aloysia felt Hollis's shoulders relax. She got the feeling of some part of him was relieved not to have heard it too. "How did you," he said, nodding from Littlewig to the lycanthrope. "Smoke," Aloysia said with a shrug, and she started picking at the grass by her knees. "I should have thought of it. It was just an accident, really." "How could you have known that would do it?" "Some lichens are sensitive to air pollutants. Maybe not as sensitive as Waxamillion here, but still." "But lichens aren't plants, are they?" he mused. And she was mildly impressed, shaking her head in confirmation. then they're not your area. You can't expect yourself to know everything about everything. Why not, she thought, ripping up a particularly satisfying handful and then feeling guilty about that, too. Everyone else seems to. Her eyes fell on his sword as he idly poked it into the ground, and she properly considered it for the first time. The seal of Tangleroot flashed at the top of the blade where it met the hilt. Where did that come from? She asked, and he gave her an apologetic smile. The tower. The tower, she answered herself. Her moment of being impressed with him was extinguished. He'd risked his safety and theirs for a weapon that made him look good. The spire, actually, it's a ceremonial sword, he said, spinning it so it flicked up dirt. Aloysia shielded herself with her hands. Even if they do expunge my record, I can still prove I was a shepherd with this. Aloysia suspected that if they failed, his sword would go the same way as her wand. But she didn't say as much. Just don't tell your sister I let you put yourself in harm's way, she said instead, conspiratorially. But the look he returned was immediately aloof. Speaking of, he said, pushing up on his sword and whistling at Littlewick, who scampered over without missing a beat. He was closely followed by Crow, who realized partway that he was allowing himself to be summoned and settled into the flying equivalent of a saunter. Let's get out of here before the big guy recovers and we have more trouble in our hands. Littlewick had begun mewling for Aloysia's attention, and she lifted him up, checked him over for injuries, and when she turned back, Hollis had picked up both of their things and continued on. Feeling irritable at his coldness in spite of what they'd just been through, Aloysia followed him, looking over her shoulder occasionally to make sure the lycanthrope hadn't had the same idea. They just needed to get to the caves of Castercombe by nightfall, she told herself. Then they'd be safe. And that was chapter 12. Chapter 11. We're now on chapter 12. That was chapter 11. Scary. With the wolf. With the lycanthrope coming through, you know. Oh boy. But pretty good. Oh god. Let's continue on then with chapter 12. Nut, indeed. Aloysia was craving a warming spell the way she ordinarily craved a cinnamon swirl. She was starting to worry she wouldn't be able to think about anything else until she had one. The sun had slipped behind the horizon, turning the pleasant heat of a golden autumn day into the blunt cold of a cloudless night. And as she walked, she suppressed a shiver. But she talked herself down from using any more magic, except in the event of another emergency. It was too risky, especially if the rest of the valley weren't going to ration theirs. She had done enough. She couldn't be the one to drain the Guardian's last drop. Instead, she rewrapped her travel cloak around her as tight as it would go and held it there in both fists, thinking irritably that Littlewick wasn't being much help either. Where she could have been cuddled up to him for warmth, he was refusing to come down from his watch spot over on her shoulder. For his part, Crow had given up any pretense of loyalty, taking up a post on Hollis's shoulder, where he was out of reach of that mauler And more pertinently, Aloysia thought, he could slide his way between the folds of the shepherd's knitted scarf. Castor Combe wasn't far now. She told herself as they came within the sight of a cave mouth, which danced with fiery torchlight. Moments later, the warmth of it was like the sun on Aloysia's face. She turned towards it like a new green leaf. "All right," Hollis said with an uncharacteristic efficiency that reminded Aloysia of Ivy. He veered off to one side of the entrance and dumped both of their packs on the ground. "Empty your pockets." So this whole trip to the up the mountain thing was a convoluted plan to rob me, he said lightly. "While I'll applaud your commitment to the grift, I'm afraid I have to take issues with being cast as the helpless victim." "I would never cast you as a helpless anything," he said, his back to her, digging around in the many side pockets of his pack and taking out the occasional item that she couldn't see. "Stubborn and proud, maybe, but not helpless." Aloysia fell silent now, annoyed that her treacherous body had taken not helpless as a compliment. She could feel herself blushing. "Empty your pockets," Hollis repeated. "Not until you tell me what we're doing." He paused, his head drooping for a second, and looked over his shoulder at her. There was a knowing smile on his face. "Stubborn." "State border," he said, as if this was an explanation, and with a nod towards the cave entrance. He went back to his rummaging, and Aloysia reluctantly began to empty her pockets on top of her unopened pack. They want to check any spells or magical implements on the way in, to make sure there's nothing threatening. Aloysia looked down at a pile that contained her wand, a couple of hair ribbons, a handful of seeds and nuts, and some pocket fluff. Sigh. "What are you getting out then?" she said unthinkingly. He shouldered his pack and stood up, and she saw his arms were full of weaponry. The sword, a small stubby knife, and a jewel-handled dagger. Her eyes widened. "Where were those when the lycanthrope was trying to have you for breakfast?" he said, incredulous. "Lunch," he corrected. She threw him a look that spoke to priorities and salient points. He smiled at her annoyance. "I packed light," he said, adjusting his bag on his shoulder, then slipping her gaze and shifting his feet. "I didn't pack excessively." "Well," she said, her arms overloaded with spells, food, and magical botanical tools, "I packed neither." They shared a smile. It was going to be a long trip. It would be less painful for them both if they could try to get along. "Well, you get in with all those?" Will you get in with all those? She asked, nodding at his portable armory. "If they're anything like further up the mountain, I will as long as I sign them in," he said with a shrug. Her eyes had landed on something small, pellucid, and faintly glowing on his belt buckle. He raised his eyebrows at her, and her cheeks heated. "Got a bug. It's luminous," she said, awkwardly, and then more urgently, "Crow, dinner!" "Oh, why don't you just go pss, 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 and have done with it?" Crow complained. "I am not your familiar." But he darted down and picked off the tiny jelly-like thing with his claws, in his claws anyway, holding it up where they could see it. It wriggled. He put his beak down to test it, but something put him off and he jerked his head away. "What's the matter?" Aloysius asked. "I eat berries," said Crow. "I know the smell of poison." "Kind of musky?" she said. Crow nodded. "Solanine. It was made It was what made nightshades so deadly. Okay. You'll be alright as long as you don't actually take a bite out of it, she reassured him. She thought of the lycanthrope. Is there anything around here that's not poisonous? Is there anything around here that's not poisonous? She said to Hollis, exasperated. As she spoke, she noted with affection that Crow was flying the glowing gastropod far out of Littlewick's reach. I hear Castercombe does an excellent line in deadly webcap soup, said Hollis with a smile as he made his way towards the cave entrance. Rolling her eyes, she followed him into the Castercombe's border cavern. It had been carved by human hands centuries before, and the marks of their tools still gleamed in the light from the torches ranged around the circular room. And from a large, roaring fireplace inset in the back well. Aloysia longed to warm herself by it, but between them and its heat was a long stone-hewn border desk, occupied by a single guard. In front of him stood another woman, a witch. Most Tanglerudians have never left the valley. Who else is going to go if not me? As she drew closer, Aloysia saw that the guard was an athletic young man, smart in his navy blue uniform, replete with Castercombe crest on his top pocket. He had a voluminous head of blonde hair, which he combed whenever his hands were free, and tossed whenever they weren't. He rolled up his shirt sleeves to display diligently toned biceps. One over there on the weighing scales, he said in his languorous drawl, the witch in front of him patting the black metal set on his desk. Cat dragging through the Dramelkin tunnel. He gestured to a thing like a low swing door inset in the stone desk. From what Aloysia could make out, it led into a tunnel that continued through the wall. You get it back at the other end. Then his eyes roved back to the travel documents in his hands before he added, Which Hua looked to be younger than Aloysia, mid to late 20s, and classically pretty in a woodland animals gather when I sing sort of way. That's that's a great way to just say she looks Disney princess-like without saying she looks Disney princess-like. She had impossibly large brown eyes and a crown of short black hair that curved under her chin. Her striking marigold red dress was tied with a big red bow at the waist. She wore a short red shoulder cape, elbow-length scarlet gloves, and her witch's hat had been starched to a point that Ivy would have respected. Here you go, Witch Hua said to the guard, in a voice that had an accent from somewhere to the north that Aloysia couldn't immediately place. She laid her wand on the scales with a metallic tinkle and a good-natured smile, and Aloysia saw that she was leading her familiar alongside her with something she had rarely seen a cat dragon tolerate before. A red leather leash, attached by a wrist strap. The hornless, dusty lilac cat dragon, with its square snout and leaf-shaped tail tip, didn't object as its witch tugged it to heel. It turned and gave them an unconcerned stare, blinking slowly with vertically pupilled eyes. Witch Hua lifted her wrist at the guardsman's demonstratively. She's a guide, Dramelkin, she said brightly. She stays with me. The guard sucked air through his teeth and winced. Oh, sorry, he said. Rules are rules. If I let you skip the Dramelkin tunnel, I'd have to let everybody. And then where would we be? He got down from the wooden chair behind the desk and stepped through the counter flap. I'll tell you what. I'll personally escort you through the gate here. He gestured to a black metal archway inset with crystals between the counter flap and the fireplace. Aloysia suspected it was enchanted to respond in some way if it detected dark magic or anything else untoward. The guard was beside Witch Hua now, and she slipped an arm around her waist. She started at the contact, widening her big, dark eyes in shock. Crow gasped, and Aloysia and Littlewick moved purposefully towards the pair. Beside her, Aloysia felt Hollis do the same. I don't know if you can tell from my voice, but... the guard said, the next part as if it was trying to... the guard said this next part as if it was a great treat. I train. Witch Hua put her head on one side and sighed. It's not that I don't sympathize, border guy, Witch Hua said. Now that she was really speaking, the words spilled out almost more quickly than Aloysia could follow, but far from making her seem flustered. Aloysia was awed at her unerring delivery. I understand that I look like the lost princess, and you feel a natural urge to kiss me in my sleep, put me over your shoulder, or otherwise rescue me in some way that I assure you would result in you sacrificing more than a few of your most favorite teeth. But let's, for a moment, entertain another idea. A better idea. An idea that would allow you to enjoy foods more solid than tomato soup and mashed rutabaga for another day. She pronounced it tomato and referred to Swede as rutabaga. Aloysia realized she must have been from Alarica. Excuse me? Sputtered the border guard. How do I put this in words in a way you'd understand? Witch Hua put a gloved finger on her chin. You know the story of Sohan and Esha? He made a noise of disagreement. Few people this far west do. It's a Valrician parable about a Rani who gets turned away from the royal court by a young Raja because he thinks her giant turtle would get in the way of their lovemaking. Makes up a lie about how it has a blade under its shell and opium hidden in a bad place, and has the turtle carted off. And let's just say by the end of the tale, the Raja who separated the Rani from her pet has had his spirit similarly separated from his body. And the moral of the story is, I guess, don't get between a lady and her turtle. The guard blinked at her, uncomprehending, made a sort of noise. In this situation, she added, you are not the turtle. Do you... Hollis started to say uncertainly to Witch Hua, when suddenly the guard let out a yelp and jerked away from her, scratching at his forearm. You did something, he cried, stabbing an accusatory finger at her, before realizing he needed every digit available to scratch himself. The itching seemed to be spreading. He was now trying to scratch his chest through his uniform. Make it stop, he demanded. The witch simply tilted her head and looked at him placidly. His eyes darted over her shoulder, caught on Aloysia's hat, and then her face. You, make it stop! I mean, I could, Aloysia said, stepping closer, but I'd have to work out the cost first. That would take half the night. Which is your best bet? What do you want? The guard said to Witch Hua, scratching furiously at his hair. I want the same thing everyone else does, she said, moving towards the counter again. To get through this godforsaken gate and be on my way without it being more trouble than it's worth. But since that apparently isn't possible, I'll take you keeping your hands to yourself and doing your job from this point on. Think you can handle that? He gave a tiny, quivering nod. Speak up, Witch Hua said, exasperated. Yes, he squeaked. Okay then, she said stiffly. Let's get on with it. By the time the procedure for checking over a cat dragon without use of a Dramokin flap was complete, one that involved running all manner of instruments over which Hua is familiar to detect hidden spells, charms, and hexes, the guard was so overwhelmed by the itching that he was trying to scratch both calves with opposite hands. Can you make it stop now? He pleaded, as Witch Hua and her cat dragon stepped through the arch. Get them through first. Witch Hua turned with a nod in the direction of Aloysia and Hollis. And they keep the drama kitten, she said, matter-of-factly. It's too young to go through that thing all on its own. Moments later, Aloysia and Hollis were watching flames flicker in their wake as they followed, Witch Hua past the fireplace and into an even more expansive cavern. Behind them, they heard the guard sigh with relief and collapse into his chair as his itching eased. There was a flicker of movement from Witch Hua, followed by the crunch of his seat breaking apart. Thanks, Aloysia said, catching up to her fellow witch. Aloysia's things were safely stowed in her pack again. Crow had returned to Hollis' shoulder, and Littlewick was snoozing in her arms, exhausted from their day's travel, as well as the excitement of all the border guards' gadgets. I don't know how that cat dragon flap worked, but I was half worried he'd get lost. No problem, Witch Hua said, with a smile that contained mutual respect. Thanks for not fixing that spell. Tickling Tulip? Aloysia asked, out of witchly interest. Here, Witch Hua said, removing a small, flick-lit vial of itching powder from a pocket of her dress. It had scrawled writing on the label, as well as being embossed with various small round icons that Aloysia faintly recognized as tactile writing for the visually impaired. See for yourself. Itching impatience? Aloysia said, impressed. Elegant. Isn't it? Witch Hua said with a conspiratorial smile, and she pocketed the vial again. You always carry that? Hollis asked behind him. His voice was concerned. Witch Hua looked at Aloysia in a you understand way. Aloysia hoped she did. You'd be surprised how often that happens, Witch Hua said breezily. It's also good for deterring the painfully altruistic, she added. Then, by way of explanation, I've lost count of the number of times I've been, quote-unquote, helped across a street I had no intention of crossing. Aloysia's cheeks flushed as she wondered whether under the right or wrong circumstances she might have been likely to fall into that category. Witch Hua's cat dragon stopped then and strained on the leash, bringing the witch to a halt. They had come to the edge of an empty train platform. A tunnel carved into the rock disappeared into shadow. Thanks, Lingui, she said casually, as she probably did 100 times a day, and she put her palm out for the cat dragon to nuzzle. You guys coming down? She asked Aloysia and Hollis, and they looked uncertainly at each other. Let me put that another way, she said Witch Hua, and Aloysia braced herself for another speech. Are you taking the train to Castacombe Central, or would you prefer to do the 9 miles on foot? And that's chapter 12. You know, for some reason, the whole line of like, oh, it's a guide Dremel kitten didn't give it away for me immediately, but I just noticed that Witch Hua is fucking blind. Probably also should have been a giveaway that the vial had Braille on it. God damn it, I'm fucking stupid. We have a blind witch. That's very interesting, actually. Chapter 13. The train was like a living room on wheels, and Aloysia loved everything about it. The benches that ran along the walls of the carriage were made of something pleasantly squashy, covered with blush pink velvet that lightened or darkened depending on whether she smoothed her fingers with the grain or against it. At their feet, there were drawers finished with cool cylindrical stone handles, each of which contained a blanket folded neatly atop another unremovable cushion. This one was less yielding than the seats and finished with a hard-wearing gray twill. Aloysia had wondered at this for a full 3 minutes before a non-magical gentleman in a purple cord jacket sitting opposite had crossed his ankles and propped his heels on his. And she realized with a jolt of pure joy that it was a retractable footstool. But easily her favorite thing was the bookcase. When she'd stepped onto the train and, foregoing the usual witchly negotiations, had let Hollis pay the smartly turned out conductor for their tickets, he had upsold them a small brass key. This was to unlock the cabinet that occupied the entire end wall and turned out to contain a small and eclectic selection of books. Which Hua, who told them as they were getting settled in their seats that they should call her by her first name, which was Lan, had been as fascinated by this as Aloysia and had asked her to keep a particular eye out for everything handwritten or typeset in an unfamiliar script. Sadly, there was nothing on the shelves that fit her description, and while Aloysia was able to take care of it, take out a slim, dubious volume purporting to contain tips for keeping the species of slugs they'd encountered outside the caverns as pets, helpfully omitting all mention of their poison, Lan was forced to make do with a hand-penned illustrated pamphlet that Aloysia found on one of the seats, espousing the virtues of feminine hygiene. This could provide some really fascinating cultural context, Lan declared when Aloysia had explained. Lan pressed the pamphlet into Hollis's hand and began to extricate a complicated folding instrument from the depths of a pocket. It opened out into something like a metal stick insect. "Do you mind?" she asked him, planting the thing across his knees, with a firmness that made him jump and a sprawling Littlewick vacate his lap. "A yammerphone," Lan said. "It listens and repeats." She gestured at Hollis with an upturned palm. "Go on then," and he began, with some discomfort, to read the pamphlet aloud. Lan giggled with glee as he read. She actually stamped her feet at one point. It didn't seem at all put off by the tisks and sighs and grumbles that reached from the various corners of the carriage, including from Crow, who had been swinging otherwise merrily from one of the triangular handles that hung from the ceiling. For his part, Hollis's face quickly turned the same color as the seats. By the time they pulled into what Lan assured them was the penultimate station, his neck was bright red with embarrassed rubbing. "Can I ask why you just put me through that?" he said to her, as a huddle of people stepped into from the train onto another shadowy stone-hewn platform. It was lit by an eerie blue-green light from the oddly shaped lamps inset along the wall at irregular intervals. "Because you don't know how to say no?" Lan teased as the doors closed and the train rattled on. "And because if something's not right in front of my face, it might as well not exist. And that includes insignificant details like the beginnings and ends of lines," she said matter-of-factly. "Don't worry, tall, dark, and humiliated," she added with a nudge of his elbow. It was all for a good cause. My linguistic research will help magical peoples everywhere communicate better and ultimately bring about world peace. I'll mention you in my acceptance speech. You're a magical linguist? Aloysia said, impressed. Lan nodded proudly. I specialize in spell speak, folklore, and endangered languages. Spell speak? Breathed Aloysia, awed. You know how to write spells? Theoretically, Lan said briskly. She shrugged. Well, someone has to. Aloysia stared at her for a moment, speechless. Just the day before, she'd felt caught out by Crow for being one of millions of witches and wizards who didn't know how to write their own spells. Now, here was someone who was keeping the dying art alive. And what brings you two to this hub of tourism this fine evening? Lan put in, looking first at Aloysia and then at Hollis. Business or pleasure? Business, said Aloysia so quickly that her fellow witch eyed her curiously. We're looking for a rare fungus, the stone cap, hard as rock and can't be cut by conventional means. So yank it out, Lan said pragmatically. Mycelia and all. With most mushrooms, that would work, said Aloysia, almost as thrilled to hear words like mycelia being used correctly as she was to hear the subject of pleasure dropped. But the stone cap has a mycelial network. There are usually hundreds in a cluster, so the network can stretch out for a mile. Said Lan, looking thoughtfully. It is interesting. You, she said, turning back to Hollis. Let me see some of that gold you were flashing around. She put out her palm, and he placed one of the familiar Tangorudian carrots into it. Perfect, she said, closing her hand around the coin and pocketing it. You've engaged my services. Aloysia and Hollis shared an uncertain look. We don't need any help, said Hollis politely, and he extended his hand to take the gold back. Oh, said Lan, unmoving. Where are you staying this close to harvest night when half the mountain's in town for the night market? Do you know somewhere? Aloysia said, taking her fellow witch's point. Lan nodded. I came prepared. There was silence as Aloysia and Hollis looked at each other, and then Hollis relented with a sigh of frustration. I've stayed there before. You're gonna love it, Lan went on. I could show you the way and ask the locals about this stone cap of yours. It's gotta be worth one little gold piece. I like Lan. I really like her already. Lan marched across the Castacomb central platform, Lingui's leash at her waist. She was twisting one end of the Yammerphone's cylindrical body so that a slimmer, copper-colored cylinder dropped out into her hand. It was marked all over with more of the raised dots. They entered a tunnel, lit with the same abyssal light they'd observed at each station the train had passed. Waves of green and blue seemed to slide over them as they walked. When they emerged, something made Aloysia stop so suddenly that several people shunted into her from behind. The tunnel had opened out into a cavern so vast and vertical that the ceiling was lost in shadow. Parts of the space were lit by colored paper lanterns strung between the stalls of the night market up ahead. Parts by the glass lanterns that swung in the hands of many of the visitors as they wove their way along the thoroughfares, but most were bathed in pools of the blue light, which Aloysia now saw was being cast not by lamps, but by bioluminescent fungi protruding in wavy duplets from the walls. Walls that were lined with buildings inset into the very rock and stretching improbably high like the stacks of an endless library. As her gaze traveled upwards, she saw witches and wizards gliding and hovering on cat dragons of all shapes, hair lengths, and colors, making exchanges at the windows of the shops. Each of these was constructed of a different combination of materials: stone, brick, wood, shoji, glass, and metal, and decorated with its own unique blend of signs, pennants, kites, wind chimes, and colorful fabrics, many of which were rippling in a breeze. Aloysia's ear attuned to the white noise of rushing air, flowing from ground vents upwards in great jets that must have been designed as regular air currents to allow the cat dragons more comfortably flight. There was one by the curve of the cave nearest to them, and Crow dived into it and hovered happily. In Aloysia's arms, Littlewig wriggled eagerly, and she had to stroke him to calm him down. "Come on, keep up," Lan said lightly now. She extended her free arm to Aloysia, who took it. They let Lan guide them through the night market, keeping a weather eye out for any sign of stone caps. Crow occasionally shouting helpful foot traffic reports from above. At one point, Lan stopped and, in a language Aloysia couldn't pinpoint, negotiated with a fair-haired woman at a stall that smelled strongly of the sea. When she was done, the woman looked annoyed but resigned, and Lan happily passed Aloysia and Hollis 2 brown bags of dried sardines and 2 steaming bowls of seafood bisque, complete with wooden spoons. They ate hungrily between 2 stalls. I never saw the word for magic wands in French, and if that is true, that's fucking hilarious. I've never seen the French word for because there's a stall holder here that is like shouting that he's selling wands in different languages. So baguette magique, Zauberstäbe, wands, local wands. The stall holder on their right was shouting at the top of her lungs. Beautiful hand engravings you won't find anywhere else. We cast the metal, you cast the spells. What difference does a local wand make? Hollis asked absently as he fed Crow another dried fish. Do they use local magic? No, said Lan with a smile and an arched eyebrow aimed at Aloysia. Where did you get this guy? Until now, Hollis had made it his own mission in life to know as little about magic as possible. What's changed? When wands are first made, and Castercom is known for its wandsmithing, new wands aren't linked to any well, or anyone, Lan explained, as she sat on the ground and stroked Lingui. Once you've chosen a new wand, you take it home to your local well and connect it to the magic there. Why can't you just connect it to the nearest one? Asked Hollis, prodding the dregs of his bisque. Because your well is the one you're connected to, said Aloysia irritably. Despite it being something that most people knew by osmosis, he'd either bloody-mindedly avoided learning the most basic magical theory, or he was playing dumb. But that would mean you can't use one you bought here until you get all the way home, said Hollis. What good is that? Oh, it's much worse than that, said Lan. Not only can you not use it until you get it home, there's also a trying registration process to go through with the local council. Quality control and all. And you have to break in your new wand. Like a pair of shoes, or like a horse. And like a horse, you and your wand don't always get along, Lan said. And that's not all. Any magic user is only allowed to be in possession of one wand at a time. Makes it easier to link spells to their caster in the event of a crime. So you also have to let them smell your first wand before you can even use the second one. Aloysia gripped her own wand in her pocket and shuddered. A handful of prospective customers, all boldly dressed youngsters, eyed them with horror and left the stall, whose owner was growing steadily redder and glowering at an oblivious Lan. People still buy new ones? Hollis said to Aloysia in disbelief. You let them smelt your wand, and then you break in a new one just so you can get something that looks nicer? She furrowed her brow, grunted. Don't look at me. Relax, said Lan. There are plenty of practical reasons to get a new wand. Yours was damaged, or it's old and not working so well, or not so well for you. There's also status in a new wand, or one carved with rare runes. In some cultures, it's a rite of passage, choosing a new wand with engravings specific to your people of your family and mastering it. It's all part of proving your adulthood. Several more browsers seemed to make decisions in that moment, and all tried to get a stallholder's attention at once. Aloysia was feeling quietly happy for the wandsmith when two officers, clad in the same navy uniform as the border guard, emerged from the throng and marched in lockstep toward the stall. Good evening, madam. The stringier of the pair greeted her. He bent at the waist, making a small bow. We regret to disturb, but we received a tiny little report about, counterfeit wands or some such a dislocation. Nothing to worry about, I'm sure. If you'd like to come with us, we can ask you some questions. The rounder female officer added brusquely, and the stringy one threw her a "we've talked about this" look. The round one sighed and added through the gritted teeth, extending a hand as if to dance. If you could be so good. Well, I do declare, cried the stallholder, swishing a skirt that moved like it was a crinoline. It's been a long time since anyone dressed as fine as you both offered me their hand, but I'm afraid there's been some kind of mistake. All my wands are the finest Virgulium, I assure you. The rounder one shook her head as the stringier, who had been looking at the woman sympathetically. See for yourselves. You, the female officer said, pointing at Aloysia. You're a witch. We're drafting your help with an active investigation. Aloysia felt Hollis move to step between them, but he was blocked by the officer's arm, which swung out and pointed a wand at her. Hold this. Aloysia understood. She held the wand out under the officer's nose, and after a few seconds, the runes engraved along the length of the black rod began to blaze orange. The only metal known to do this at the touch of a magic user was Virgulium. Aloysia had proven the stallholder's innocence. Grumbled the female officer. Sorry to have troubled you. Just then, Littlewick, who must have spied one of the small rodents they'd been scurrying here and there between the stalls, sprang from Aloysia's arms and crash-landed on a box on the stallholder's feet, upending it so that the tens of wands scattered on the ground. I'm so sorry. Aloysia scooped the often offending familiar onto her shoulder before bending to gather up all the wands, with the help of Hollis and the two officers. While the woman protested in a high-pitched tone, That's mighty kind, but you needn't. Aloysia, holding a particularly intricate wand, met the woman's gaze and saw a twitch of fear. The stallholder reached out to grab the wand, but Aloysia instinctively yanked it out of her reach. It wasn't blazing. Only the display wands are real, the female officer declared, delighted. Oh, we've got you now. At this, the stallholder took off, diving over the stall behind and taking half the magical gadgetry there with her in a swish of her crinoline. The officers gave chase, leaving Aloysia crouched, dumbfounded among the wands. And for a moment, she was so shocked, she continued to repack them out of habit. This was how her hand came upon a wand packed in silver parchment, its end protruding with the wrapper where the wrapper had been torn. "It's gold," she breathed, sliding it out of the parchment and holding it close to admire the etchings, which were like no runes she had ever seen. She had assumed it was a little more than a novelty, something to trot out to the flashier looking customers, but as soon as her hand closed over the bare metal, she felt a thrum from inside it, like the wings of a caged bird. Not only did it blaze, it hummed. There was a shriek nearby. It seemed the stallholder was bringing the commotion back in the direction. Intuiting that the woman was likely realized she'd forgotten this particular wand in her rush. Aloysia stuffed it back in its wrapper and turned it to the others. "Let's go." A few of the makeshift streets away, they stopped to catch their breath. As they did, Lan leaned into Hollis and palmed him back with his gold karat. "Wouldn't want to overcharge you," she said, widening her eyes gleefully and opening her scarlet cape to show them a flash of gold. "The wand. This is more than enough." It was just as Lan had said. When they finally pushed their way out of the night market, Aloysia red-faced and fretful, feeling as though everyone they passed could see right through Lan's cape, and that a stream of more uniformed officers was about to burst out of every gap between the stalls, they found themselves in the accommodation quarter, where every hotel, lodge, and guest house that advertised its availability had the same thing to say. Full, Belny, pas de post vacances, rooms 0. They stared up at the wall of a hotel and inn fronts in all different shapes, styles, and materials, each protruding from the rock to different extents. Like those library stacks had been plucked at, or else the loans badly reshelved. "Which one's ours?" Hollis asked Lan, and Aloysia noticed that even the shepherd was starting to sound worse for wear. It made her feel less pathetic about her drooping. Straining exhaustion that was making it difficult for her to keep stinging eyes open. Oh my god, my nose. Okay. 12th row up, Lan replied, and Hollis and Aloysia squinted into the distance, mentally counting. 24th one along. Aloysia's gaze traveled to an elaborate wooden shoji bathhouse that jutted from the rock like a chin. 12th row up. She wanted to cry, but she didn't have the energy. "Come on then," said Lan, climbing onto Lingui's back and beckoning to the others. Aloysia loved her in that second. "Get on." Moments later, her heavy, uncomfortable pack forming a lumpy shield between them, Aloysia and Hollis were on the back of Lingui. Littlewick was tucked into Aloysia's apron pocket, his tufty head and front paws sticking out, his snout twitching and his forked tongue tasting the air curiously. The pocket wouldn't have taken his weight as they walked, but at least it kept him in one place as Lingui flapped. With the same graceful power as Hedera, upwards on an air current from the nearest vent. Quicker and nimbler, Crow had gone on ahead to save them a place in any queue that might form at the reservation window before they could reach it. He wished she hadn't. "Hanarete!" The short magical woman in the yellow kimono who owned the building was screaming as she came into view. She was leaning out of the wide rectangular ground floor. Oh my god, she's speaking Japanese. This is gonna be awful. This is gonna be awful. She was leaning out of the wide rectangular ground floor window of the bathhouse and sweeping at Crow with a broom. Watashi kara hanarai. Wait, what? Hanare nasai, sawaranai de. Aloysia had no idea what she was saying, but she recognized the language as the one that Mr. King Yoso and Ryuka spoke to each other in the familiar shop, but it didn't take a linguist to realize the woman didn't like birds. Hey! Crow complained, dodging a particularly aggressive sideways swing. Is that any way to treat a customer? Yamero! Lan shouted at the woman as Lingui put on a turn of speed that threw them all forward. Oh my god, there's way more! Why are they speaking more Japanese? Oh wait, okay, it seems... Yeah, no, they're speaking more Japanese. Fuck! Aloysia flung out her hands to avoid squishing Littlewick, and Hollis's arms grabbed her around her middle, steadied her. She could still feel it there after he'd let go. Yamenasai! This was the third language Aloysia had heard Lan speak that night. Kare wa watashi to ishi da yo. After a lengthy and grudging discussion, the older woman threw Hollis a disapproving glare, accepting the 3 spells for clear skin that Lan had helped Aloysia negotiate with, and handed over a silver key dangling from a wooden oblong. Evidently, the unfamiliar carved writing was a room number. 1 room number. And then Lingui swept them away. Where's Hollis supposed to sleep? Aloysia said as realization dawned. Lingui was coming into land at a prettily carved wooden side door, artfully designed to swing inwards at the butt of her head. Everyone ducked. They came to a graceful stop inside a dark, low corridor that smelt faintly of plum blossoms. Someone had only recently finished an aromatic steam. Is that woman anti-non-magic? Aloysia whispered to Lan hotly. She was both furious on Hollis's behalf and too exhausted to argue. She was holding out hope that she wouldn't have to. Yes, said Lan, and Aloysia's heart squeezed. She turned to go. As she turned to go back the way they'd come before remembering she couldn't fly. Lan stepped down from a crouching Lingui and patted her gratefully, before adding, pragmatically, why do you think she's actually got a room available? Might not be the last one in the might not be the last one in the whole Castacomb, but I'm not about to spend all night flying around unless you can speak 24 languages. I don't think you're going to have a lot of luck without me. Aloysia stepped down too and turned to look apologetically at Hollis behind her. He forced a tired smile. It's all right, he reassured her. You get some sleep. There's bound to be a sofa or something around here. And get woken up by her ladyship screaming and batting you with her broom? Lan interrupted sardonically. I wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, it's okay, she said to Aloysia. She was fine with him staying once I told her you guys are married. But we're not married, Hollis said quickly, looking embarrassed at the suggestion. He looked at Lan a little longer and harder than was strictly necessary, and a few things suddenly fell into place for Aloysia. No wonder he'd pretended to know so little about magic in the night market. He'd wanted an excuse to talk to their pretty new companion. Yes, I get that, said Lan with a twinkle. I just figured this might be preferable to sleeping in a doorway. But hey, what do I know? Maybe she snores and talks in her sleep. Hollis dropped his gaze, and Aloysia knew they were both thinking about their night in the rotunda. Well, Lan turned to Aloysia with a stifled yawn. It's past my bedtime. You've got the key, and Mr. Commitment here clearly isn't going to be much help with the decision-making. She tossed him a knowing smile, and then looked directly at Aloysia. I say, do with him what you will. And that's just the end of the chapter. What? Do with him what you will. Okay, so what time is it? It's 1:05. This book is clever and fun. I love it. I love Lan Hua as a character. She's so cool. And it's so cool. She's a blind linguist. That is such a cool combination. I love that. I did struggle a little bit with the Japanese. Do not get me wrong. But still. Oh god. Now that I think about it, am I going to have to speak other languages now as well? Is there going to be like a French section at some point or something? Or a German section? Oh no. I look at like 2 pages ahead and I just see, Mon Dieu! Cette créature, elle est énorme! Énorme! Oh my god, I actually have to speak some French. No! I mean, best case is I have to speak German at some point as well, because I mean, obviously I am very familiar with German, but I guess we have to speak some French at some point as well. But I think this is where we're gonna end for tonight. They reached the cabin, they're gonna go to sleep, and then next time we'll see what they're gonna be doing in town, huh? What they're gonna be doing in Castacombe. Why are they speaking all the different languages? Just give me German. Half the book could just be in German at this point. I wouldn't even fucking care. I could read it, obviously. The only thing that surprised me... Yeah, no, I just looked it up. It actually is that. The French word for wand is baguette magique. La baguette magique. God damn it. What the hell, French? I don't want a magical baguette. All right. We are going to hop over to Genshin Impact. Time to finish exploring the Temple of Space. There you go. We gotta explore Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, yep. Yep, yep. Don't know if I have full resin right now as well. I don't think I do because I was farming earlier this morning. But I need to farm Mora and XP books like fucking crazy though. Jesus fucking Christ. I have nothing. I have nothing. I have nothing. I am broke. Absolute broke. Yeah. But I'm glad that at least my Linnea is already level 80 out of 90. She's ascended to max.